In therapy, silence often tells you more than words. Finally, he looked at me. I think my wife is going to leave me. His voice almost disappeared at the end of the sentence. I asked him a simple question. Why do you think that? He laughed. Not because anything was funny, it was the laugh people make when they're exhausted. She barely talks to me anymore. He stared at the floor. She doesn't hug me. Another pause. She doesn't look at me the way she used to. He swallowed. When I text her, he said, it sometimes takes hours before she replies. His breathing became heavier. And every single time, I think, this is it. This is the day she finally leaves. I nodded slowly. Then I asked him something he wasn't expecting. Michael, has she already left you? He looked confused. What do you mean? I leaned forward. I didn't ask if she still lives in your house. I asked, has she already left you? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I continued. Does she still share her thoughts with you? He looked down. No. Does she still reach for your hand? No. Does she still seem excited to spend time with you? Another silence. Then, no. I let the room become completely quiet. Sometimes the truth needs silence to arrive.
Finally, I spoke again. So tell me, are you afraid she'll leave? Or are you afraid to admit she already has? Michael froze. His eyes filled with tears almost instantly, because for the first time, he wasn't imagining a future loss. He was facing a loss. That had been happening for years, little by little, conversation by conversation, silence by silence. He hadn't lost her overnight. He had been losing her, one ordinary day at a time, and somehow that realization hurt even more. He covered his face with both hands. I've been trying so hard to fix this. I buy flowers. I write long messages. I apologize. Even when I don't know what I'm apologizing for, I keep thinking, if I love her enough, maybe she'll come back. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I asked another question. Michael, what exactly are you trying to bring back? He frowned. My wife. I slowly shook my head. No, I don't think that's true. I think you're trying to bring back the woman she used to be. And those are not always the same person. Michael stared at the floor. I don't understand. I nodded. I know. That's why this hurts so much. He looked back at me. So you're telling me? I've been fighting for someone who's already gone. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked him another question. When was the last time you truly felt loved by her? He closed his eyes. His lips moved silently, as if searching through years of memories. Finally, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I remember when everything changed. I leaned back. Tell me. He took a deep breath. It wasn't a big fight. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't another man. It was, nothing. He looked confused by his own answer. We just slowly stopped being us. No more long conversations. No more laughing. Or no more dreaming together. We became roommates. We shared a house, but not a life. I nodded slowly. That's how emotional abandonment usually happens. It rarely arrives with an explosion.
It arrives quietly, so quietly, that most people don't even notice it. Michael looked at me. So what do people do? They panic. They confuse distance with a challenge. They believe that if they love harder, they can reverse what has already happened. He whispered. That's exactly what I've been doing. I smiled gently. I know. I've seen it hundreds of times. They buy more gifts. They become more available. They stop expressing their own needs. They become afraid of saying anything that might upset the other person. And little by little, they disappear. Michael frowned. What do you mean? I mean, they abandon themselves. The room became silent again. You stopped saying what hurt you. He nodded. You stopped asking for what you needed. Another nod. You accepted less and less. And because you were terrified of losing what little was left. This time, he couldn't answer. Because it was true. Every compromise had cost him a small piece of himself. Until one day, there was almost nothing left. I stood up and walked toward the window. People hurried through the street below. Everyone seemed busy, completely unaware that somewhere above them, a man was discovering the real reason he had been suffering. Without turning around, I asked him one last question. Michael, if someone asked you today, who have you been fighting harder to save? Your marriage or yourself? The answer never came. Because sometimes the most honest answer is silence. And in that silence, I realized something that would completely change the way I understood heartbreak. People rarely destroy themselves the day they are abandoned. They destroy themselves during the months or even years they spend begging someone to love them again. That was the real tragedy. Not losing another person, losing yourself while trying to keep them. Michael finally spoke, barely above a whisper. I don't even recognize the man I've become. I looked him straight in the eyes. Then maybe this isn't the moment to save your relationship. Maybe it's the moment to save yourself. And for the first time since he had walked into my office, Michael stopped crying. Not because the pain was gone, but because, for the very first time, he knew exactly where it came from. Michael remained silent. He looked out the window for a long time. Finally, he asked, "So what am I supposed to do? Walk away? I still love her." I nodded. I never said you didn't. Loving someone and accepting reality are two different things. He looked at me with tired eyes. I don't know how to stop hoping. I smiled. Hope isn't always your friend. He frowned. What do you mean? There are two kinds of hope. The first one helps you build a better future. The second one traps you inside a past that no longer exists. You've been living on the second one. Michael slowly lowered his head. I continued. Tell me something. When she walks into the room, what's the first thing you look for? He didn't hesitate. I watch her face. What are you looking for? A smile. And if she smiles, I think maybe today is different. And if she doesn't, my whole day falls apart. I nodded. Do you realize what just happened? He looked confused. I don't. You've handed another human being complete control over your emotional life. If she smiles, you feel alive. If she's distant, you collapse. If she texts you, you breathe again. If she doesn't, your mind creates 100 terrible stories. He closed his eyes, because every word was true. Michael, when did you stop being responsible for your own peace? The room became completely still. I don't know. I do. He looked up. It happened the day you started believing that your happiness depended on someone else's decision to love you. A tear rolled down his cheek. I've been living like that. Yes. For years. He whispered. I don't even know who I am anymore. I leaned forward. That sentence is the beginning of recovery. He looked surprised. Really? Yes. Because people don't heal when they get their ex back. They heal when they get themselves back. For the first time, Michael wasn't thinking about saving his marriage. He was thinking about saving the man who had disappeared inside it. I stood up and walked toward the bookshelf. I picked up an old photograph. It wasn't personal. It was something a former patient had once given me. It showed an old bridge after a flood. Half of it had collapsed. The other half was still standing. I placed it on the table. What do you see? A broken bridge? No. He looked again. I see. Half a bridge. Exactly. Most people spend years staring at what collapsed. They never notice what survived. He stayed quiet. So let me ask you, what parts of you are still standing? He didn't answer. Not because he couldn't. Because no one had asked him that question before. For months, everyone had been asking about his marriage. No one had asked about him. I watched him carefully. His breathing had changed. His shoulders were lower. The panic was beginning to leave the room. And then he asked me something that almost every patient asks sooner or later. What if she comes back? I smiled. That's the wrong question. He looked puzzled. The real question is, if she came back tomorrow, would you still be the man who begged her to stay? Or would you be someone she had to meet again and meet for the very first time? Michael didn't answer, but something in his expression changed. For the first time, he wasn't imagining how to recover the relationship. He was imagining who he could become without it. And that's when I knew our work had finally begun. Michael didn't say another word for almost a minute. He was staring at the photograph of the broken bridge. Then he looked at me. I don't think I know how to live without her. I nodded. I believe you. But that's exactly the problem. He frowned. What do you mean? I don't think you're afraid of losing your wife. I think you're afraid of meeting yourself. He looked genuinely confused. I don't understand. Tell me, when was the last time you had a good day? That had nothing to do with her. He searched his memory. Nothing. When was the last time you laughed without wondering if she was happy? Silence. When was the last time you made a decision without asking yourself what she would think? Again, nothing. I leaned back. Michael, your marriage didn't become your relationship. It became your identity. His eyes widened. And when our identity depends on another person, their distance feels like our disappearance. He rubbed his face. So that's why I feel empty. Exactly. Because you've spent years confusing love with identity. I paused. Healthy love adds to your life. It doesn't replace it. He whispered. I don't remember the man I was before I met her. I smiled gently. Most people don't. They remember who they were with that person, but not who they were alone. The room became quiet again. Then I asked him something unexpected. If your wife walked into this office right now, what do you think she'd say? He looked uncomfortable. I don't know. Try. He closed his eyes. After a few seconds, he began speaking, as if he were hearing her voice. She'd probably say, I'm tired. Everything feels heavy. I don't recognize us anymore. His voice broke. And then she'd probably say, I feel guilty because I don't know how to love you the way I used to. A tear rolled down his cheek. I handed him a tissue. You know something? He looked at me. I've noticed something after thousands of therapy sessions. The person who leaves usually starts grieving, long before the breakup happens. Michael stared at me. What do you mean? Most people think the breakup begins the day someone packs a suitcase. It doesn't. It begins months earlier, in silence, in emotional distance, in conversations that never happen, in hugs that slowly disappear, in smiles that become polite instead of genuine. He lowered his head. So while I was trying to save us, she was already saying goodbye. I think she had been saying goodbye for a very long time. The weight of those words filled the room. Then Michael asked the question I knew was coming. So, does that mean there was nothing I could have done? I didn't answer immediately, because this was the most dangerous moment of every therapy. If I said yes, he would feel powerless. If I said no, he would spend years blaming himself. So I chose a different path. I don't know. He looked surprised. And neither do you. He frowned. You've spent months replaying every conversation, every argument, every mistake, as if your mind could travel back in time and rewrite history. It can't. The past is not a problem to solve. It's a lesson to understand. He took a deep breath. So how do I stop thinking about everything I should have done? I smiled. You don't. You start thinking about everything you're still able to become. For the first time, Michael wasn't looking behind him. He was looking ahead. Only a little. But sometimes, 1 inch is enough to change the direction of an entire life. Michael was still staring at the floor. Then he asked me something I had heard hundreds of times before. So, does this happen to everyone? I smiled. No. But it happens more often than people imagine. I stood up and walked toward a small cabinet where I kept old notebooks. Over the years, I'd written down thoughts that my patients had taught me. Not their names, not their stories, only the lessons. I opened one of them. There was a woman. I'll call her Sarah. Michael listened carefully. Sarah wasn't afraid of being abandoned. She was afraid of being forgotten. Those sound like the same thing. They're not. When her husband stopped looking at her, she disappeared. Not physically, emotionally. She began dressing differently, talking differently, even laughing differently. She wasn't trying to become happier. She was trying to become impossible to leave. Michael whispered, "That sounds familiar." I nodded. It should. Because fear always asks us to become someone else. It never asks us to become more of ourselves. The room fell silent. I continued. One day I asked Sarah, "When did you stop being yourself?" She looked at me, completely confused. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't know who myself is anymore." Michael closed his eyes. "I've said that today." "Yes. And that's exactly why I told you about her." He looked at me. "What happened?" She spent years trying to become the perfect wife, the perfect listener, the perfect partner, the perfect woman. And one afternoon, she finally asked her husband something. "What else do you need from me?" Michael remained perfectly still. What did he say? I slowly closed the notebook. He looked at her and answered, "I don't know." Michael frowned. "That's all. That was all." "And do you know why?" He shook his head. "Because when someone has emotionally checked out, there is no list you can complete. No version of yourself will suddenly make them love you again." The silence became heavy. Michael looked toward the window. Rain had started falling again, softly, almost gently. He whispered, "So all this time, I've been trying to solve a problem. That wasn't mine to solve." I nodded. Exactly. Love is an invitation. It can never be a negotiation. Then another patient came back to my memory, a man named David. He once told me something that completely changed the way I understood heartbreak. He said, "Doctor, I don't miss my wife. I miss waking up believing someone chose me." I looked at Michael. "Do you hear the difference?" He thought for a moment. Then, very slowly, he nodded. One man missed a person. The other missed what that person made him feel about himself. I smiled. And that's the beginning of wisdom. Because once you understand that, it You stop chasing people, and you start rebuilding yourself. Michael leaned back in his chair. For the first time since he had entered my office, his breathing was calm. Not because life had changed, not because his marriage had suddenly healed, but because, for the first time, he had stopped asking, how do I make her love me again? And had started asking, why did I stop loving myself? That is the question that changes everything. Michael remained seated. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes, the most important part of therapy isn't what is said. It's what finally becomes impossible to deny. After almost a minute, he looked at me. I'd been asking the wrong question. I smiled. What was the question? How do I make her love me again? And now? He took a deep breath. Now I think the question is, why was I willing to stop loving myself just to keep someone else? For the first time that morning, I smiled, not because he was healed, but because he had finally stopped looking in the wrong direction. Michael, do you know why this realization matters so much? He shook his head. Because you'll never heal by fixing the wrong problem. He stayed silent. You believed your suffering began the day your wife stopped loving you. It didn't. It began the day your self-worth became dependent on her love. Those words hung in the air. He slowly removed his wedding ring. He turned it between his fingers. I thought this ring meant she would always stay. I looked at it for a moment. No. It only meant that one day, two people made a promise. It never guaranteed. They would both be able to keep making it forever. A tear rolled down his face. I feel like I've wasted years. I gently shook my head. No. You've paid for wisdom. He looked surprised. What's the difference? Wasted years teach you nothing. Pain that transforms you becomes wisdom. He leaned back. So none of this was meaningless. Not unless you decide it was. The office became quiet again. Then I asked him one final question. Michael, if you met the man who walked into my office this morning, what advice would you give him? He smiled through his tears. I'd tell him to stop begging. I'd tell him to stop checking his phone every 5 minutes. I'd tell him to stop trying to earn love. He paused, then added quietly, and I'd tell him that he deserves peace. I nodded. So maybe you're finally ready to hear what I've wanted to tell you since the beginning. He looked at me. When someone no longer chooses you, your job isn't to convince them. It's to choose yourself again. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly chasing someone else's decision. The day you stop chasing is the day your dignity starts coming home. Michael looked around my office one last time. It was strange. Nothing had changed. The same walls, the same chair, the same window, the same rain-soaked street outside. And yet, everything was different. Not because his marriage had been saved, not because his wife had changed her mind, but because, for the first time in years, he understood that healing had never depended on her. It depended on him. He stood up. This time, he didn't hesitate. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around one last time. Doctor, I came here terrified that she would leave me. He smiled softly. I didn't realize. I'd already left myself. I smiled. And now? He opened the door. Now I'm going to find him. The door closed gently behind him. I never saw Michael again, but I often wonder what happened next. Maybe his marriage ended. Maybe it didn't. Because in the end, that was never the real story. The real story was the day one man stopped measuring his worth through someone else's ability to love him. And perhaps that's your story too. If today's session brought even a little clarity into your life, Subscribe to The Breakup Therapist. Every week, I share psychological insights designed to help you heal after heartbreak, rebuild your self-worth, and understand why some endings become the beginning of your best life. Now, I'd like to ask you one question. Which part of today's session felt like it was describing your own life? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, you'll never be enough for the wrong person. Understand the ending and build your new beginning. I'll see you in the next session.